And hello again. There's another example of how to use those crazy particle brushes with the force fields. What I'm doing here is I'm looking at a picture that I got from Dartenbeck. No, this one's from Ringo Monfort sent me a rendering of I think done in Carrara, and it's essentially what I use as a force field now. So when you paint with it, the image is using the features of the program is using the features of this image to find the force fields and to align the particles to align them against those features. To give you an idea, let's go back to step one. No layers initially. Let's go. In fact, let's delete this layer. And so I start with this image, and let's go free the force field, and I'm going to the particle brushes. So you click up here, you have the brush selected as the tool, you go to particles, and you have this floating window here with the particle brushes. There's bristles, orbitals, foliage, and regular particles. And in the regular particles, you see the force field. So you click on that, it grabs the current image, and analyzes that to build a deflection map, a force field that will affect which way the particles go. Now, if you have no force field, let's go check this off. And let's say you start with one of the default brushes or effects. You know, I don't even know which one it is. Let's just start something different. Let's take with paddy grass. So here's some grass. Let's go without the tinting, without the shading. There you go. So it's doing its own thing. It's going its own way. But when you enable the force field, let's go and undo this. Let's go enable the force field. Now you see that it's deflecting it based on some of the features that it finds. Right? It has a well, sometimes destructive side effect, but sometimes also a very interesting beneficial effect, meaning you can create some interesting new hairdo here with just a couple of brush strokes, perhaps changing the color of that to give it more of a mohawk or other type of appearance. But the thing is, it's particularly interesting to play with those parameters here for the contour, the slope, the hue, or the value to be used, so that you see it line up against that force field. So let's go do that perhaps step by step. I did first load this in here, then I grab this as a force field, and now that I have the force field, I will go into a new layer so I can experiment with that. And that new layer will be in additive mode, not in multiply mode. With dark, it would just multiply it black. And so now I can go and experiment with the force field over the original image. I don't actually need to see that original image necessarily. The force field is still there and the painting is still happening, albeit in additive mode here. But I think it's good to see the original image there behind it as well, so I have a visual reference for where the actual force field might be in effect. So let's go and make sure we are on that top layer and delete it and start painting perhaps with a little bit more power. And so you see some interesting hairdo come out of that. Let's go change perhaps to a slightly different. Let's see what other type. Well, you know, you can build your own. Just click on the gradient here and build your own here, or click here to load some of the presets. Picture frames quite often have some interesting gradients as well. Let's go and choose one of those. Okay, so this is where you choose it. Actually, this is the editor where you can change it. You might want to add some opacity change or transparency, its counterpart. So go down on opacity, go up, go back down towards the end, and all sorts of other effects you can apply just by the gradients themselves. The lines, instead of keeping them always as a same size line, you can have it shrinking, so they start a little bit fatter and then they get thinner towards the end. Or you can make them very thin to begin with. Let's go and erase every once in a while. There you go. Perhaps come closer to what the original image has, right? Very thin reddish hair. Now, if we want to give it the same tint, one thing I'd recommend is use the color pickup tool here, or the turkey baster, and actually grab the tint, let's say this area here, and you can see the colors change as you grab and drag around, but just pick one of these to get something similar to that tint, and then actually enable here, tint it, right? Go make sure you go enable this particles again, and so now the gradients will be multiplied by the tint color in addition, and so that will give it even more of the of that effect. What I'm missing right now though is, let's see, I need the particles to be rendered. Oops, I don't know why it's not rendering at this point. Is it the force field needs to be, oh, maybe the force field needs to be reinitialized. Let's go here, grab the force field, there you go. Let's go back to that. And I'm still not rendering, so that's a puzzle to me. Maybe I have a selection mask. No, I don't think I do. Let me reset. I'm gonna press the dot that resets my brush. Oh, I'm painting on the wrong layer. There you go. I couldn't see it because it was in, I guess, in multiply mode, default mode here. So let's go and clear that. There you go. Put that in the layer. Go back to the top layer. Make sure it's still in additive mode. There it is. Yeah. And at this point, if I enable this, I am still not seeing much. What is the magic behind that? Let's say without testing. Oh, what is it? That's, oh, maybe I picked a black. Oh, I have a black color here. Look at that. Of course, if I'm adding black to nothing, it's not going to change much. So I must have picked the wrong. Maybe I picked it from the wrong layer. There you go. I was not in the right layer when I picked it. I need to be in the layer. There you go. Okay, let's go do that. So let's go do this properly. This one will erase. This layer here will go and make sure we have the original image. Now we have the turkey base, so let's go pick the color from that. Okay, now we got this color here. You see kind of a reddish tint from our red hair. Let's make sure that's good. Let's go to the top layer now and enable tinting and enable the particles. There you go, and now we have them. All right, so that's what the problem was, is that I was not actually painting anything but black. In additive mode, you don't see any change. No surprise there. All right, so now that I can erase and use the force field here, you can see that it's doing its magic, and I wanted to just go through a few more of the settings on the force field, because some of these will be quite intriguing and interesting. You have a power level you can adjust, and you have the force drag. So the force drag keeps it a little bit more in line with the shape, and if you combine that with the power, you get a little bit of both. Force drag a little bit too much here. There you go. Okay, let's see, for instance, now if we also have, I don't know if we want the shading. That's going to make it look dark on the particles that go downwards. Let's keep it on. Let's maybe have it a little bit darker like so, a little bit bigger size. There you go. And let's go now change those other, look at these other styles. So we've been using the contour mode, which does a pretty good job in general at following the contours. But there are some others that I like to explore too. The slope, and let's try a little bit more slope. Okay, I'll let you play with that. You know, sometimes depending on the scenario and the background image, you'll see some that work better than others. The hue, let's go to the hue. Now that one has a little bit of an interesting slant going to the left, and that one actually might be really interesting too, to make it almost look like it's being draped by some sort of a, well, yeah, force field, you know, some sort of a halo piece of clothing that's semi-transparent. Let's say perhaps the value, one more here. That one too, that one even more kind of follows the shape of her body here in this case. And so you can see how it could lend itself to creating some interesting, very different looking glow effects, because after you've done that, you go to filter, photographic filters, and add some light diffusion to make it glow a little bit more, like so. And nothing prevents you from say, well, I'm not done. You can add a little bit more and see if that does something of interest. You can also adjust the opacity of that additive layer here, or perhaps add one more, add another layer, make that one also additive, right? And do some more on that with different settings, maybe without the tinting. Let's go erase this one and do one more like that. Now that one may be a little bit too intense, and that's when it's nice to have it on a layer so you can adjust that a little bit. And there you go. So I just wanted to point you to that force field with a little bit more insights on some of the effects you can get with that, because this one is an example on just a single full body almost, but you can certainly see using that also in other ways. For instance, if you look at this one here, let's put it back to screen mode perhaps for a change. What you could do is perhaps you have a scenario where you look just at somebody's head and you want to adjust a little bit some of these effects there, right? So that deflection is what the force field allows you to do. Let's go very fine. There you go. Let's go perhaps using the hue mode. Let's go slope mode, and let's still stay tinted. There you go. So here's an interesting example where you can almost add some more hair to that original if you needed to. The slope. Now let's see the contour mode. That one also. All of these really have their own peculiar styles, and all the while you do this, by the way, while you're painting these particles, it is not only subject to the force field. Yeah, the force field has a big influence here on which way these particles flow, but that's not the only thing. You can still also, on the particle settings themselves, use the mouse velocity, right? So as you go slowly or you go fast, it totally affects which way the particles shoot off initially, and that has then ultimately a big effect also on which way the final particle path actually ends up going, because it combines with the force field, but it has an initial velocity that is dictated to a large extent by what you do with the mouse. There's also particles follow the mouse, so they change direction regardless of how fast you move. They change direction with the direction in which the mouse goes. So you might get different results if you go this way, like into the hair, versus going out of the hair, and the particles change according to that. So anyway, that's the thing I wanted to show you here on this. A lot of different ways to make some rather strange looking shapes at times. Let's say, for instance, I'm not doing that in a separate layer, but I'm doing that right on top of the original. So I'm going to delete this layer and paint right on this one and do something like this, and then perhaps blend it at that point with the interactive undo to get a little bit of both worlds. Or not, maybe you're looking for just something that's that doesn't even show the original figure underneath it, and that's where some of the magic really happens too. Is you can create some rather interesting shapes that the force field is controlling, but you can't really tell the original image anymore because you've erased it. And so if you look at this here, maybe after a little while you can come back to, you can recognize some of the base features, right, as you go around it here. And that creates perhaps a totally different level of abstract art, or just very scary ghost images. And combine that with different gradients, combine that with without the tinting, with different sizes, changing the gain, tons of little side effects, simply courtesy of the force field in Project Dog Waffle's particle system. Alright, thanks for watching.